Hey, how are you going? Been a while since I've come online. Just a short one, maybe, about um, protests and the insanity that's going on all over the world. And what I notice is the lack of taking it to where the problem is, protesting in public squares and down main streets, you know, near monuments. And does that really help us? Because we know now that this is a billionaire pedophile syndicate and trillionaire. We know that basically the oligarchs, and we know who they are. You can't tell me that, oh, it's too difficult to find their where they live. I mean, that if that's what's stopping us, then my goodness, we deserve to be in the situation we're in. But it is a step that needs to be taken in that, and I'm calling for that we actually appear at their doorsteps, places of residence, wherever they may be in the world. And people, you can't tell me that that's too difficult to get that information. Even in South Africa, I mean, if they're internationalists, they love South Africa. I mean, imagine they can't come to their palace in Cape Town ever again because they're constantly being harassed, or Bishop's Court or Constantia, wherever they may live, Sandton or Umhlanga, wherever these palaces of theirs may be. New York City, of course, where they often are, and So yeah, in order to find Dracula, in the old story of Dracula, which is what we're dealing with, the similarities are quite phenomenal. Dracula, sucks your blood basically, drains the energy of people, and he has to be, however, invited in, no matter how feeble or sneaky that invite is. Once he's in, it's just about impossible to get rid of the bastard. And more creepily so, since we hear about all these children and the links to human trafficking. I mean, I find it very interesting how they show this big human traffic bust in like a South American country or Central American country with the American FBI and CIA or whoever it was. Great, rounding up all these children. But it's amazing how it's, and also the recognition that Haitian children, Clintons in Haiti, having a bit of a Guinness as well, and how they have been targeted, but I still haven't seen that big bust for the ethnic European kids, and wonder why that is. Is that because it's white gold? Is there something to that? The whole idea of that, and that term kind of means something. That they had a term like that for the slave trade. It was called white gold. So predominantly females trafficked into Arabian countries, and this is an ancient thing. It's not a new thing, but it's continuing now. And we just always assumed in the last 100 years that we passed that kind of thing, whereas clearly we're not. We see the numbers of children that have gone missing, and then also you're not even factoring in the orphanages and that kind of thing. Where they're not really accounted for. They're not having someone, a parent check in on them or family check in on them or anything because they are orphans. And there was that thing on the Isle of Wight, I think it broke in the 90s, and then kind of disappeared. And I was like, well, where are the arrests? I mean, those housemasters and teachers and what have you wouldn't have just pegged off. They would still be around. I mean, they can't be more than 70, 80 years old. So many of them would still be around. But that whole thing seemed to just vanish in the mainstream media, which means the mainstream media, as we know, is absolutely part of it. And now we're under lockdown and we're having more people waking up, but no direction to actually go into the right areas. And taking on the establishment where it's impossibly strong. I mean, a protest in the middle of London, they could probably handle 60,000 people and the police would get on top of it because they got massive barracks, massive supplies. They prepared for it. And plus it goes nowhere. You've not intimidated a single one of these people who are holding our entire world to ransom. Which is another thing, holding to ransom. But they actually do have real power over us because of the monetary system. And this is where, rather alarmingly, there's a lot of things that line up with the beast system. I mean, you look at the patent that they put on the coronavirus or whatever it is, or the ID 2020, it's like ID 2020 06 06 06. You know, I mean, you know, they love to have this stamp their name all over it. I don't know if it's just trolling the Christians or if there is actually in this phase of Revelations, which is quite an interesting topic in itself. And it needs to be discussed way, way more. You know, what are the boxes that are ticked? I mean, for me, the boxes that are not ticked are that, you know, the signs in the sky and the more sort of supernatural things are not happening. But we definitely seen the sea engulfing the woman. The sea is the nations, all the tongues of nations, and the engulfing them. You know, the woman is the European countries and so on being swarmed with third world immigrants. And that's taken place, but then it says the earth will swallow them up. I don't really know what the earth, I definitely don't think it's literally swallowing them up because that would just be way too easy. I don't know what the earth represents in that scenario, but there's a lot of scenarios that are ticking the boxes. I mean, you cannot buy or sell, which will be part of this whole thing. We can see how they can implement that, and they already are to an extent. You know, as I say, local pubs, a lot of your leisure activities, you have to have an app. You must book in advance. It's rather unpleasant. You know, the way that this is been, you know, done, where they've taken the leisure activities first and travel, of course. You can't travel to Europe, which living in London is a huge bummer, because that is the downside of London, is it's not a nice place to be. You work, but for that benefit of being able to travel. And now that's just an absolute obstacle course, especially if you're a Christian and you will not take these, you know, track and trace sort of things because you're not submitting to the mark of the beast. And quite honestly, I don't have any evidence to see that it's not the mark of the beast. I mean, they're putting their stamp all over it, you know, with numbers of 666 and groups of 6 for 6 months, 6 feet apart. But of course, these people are immensely deceptive and have always been. I would like some more insight into this, to be quite honest. The fact that just over Easter, basically churches were shut down. They don't really have total freedom at all. There's cathedrals and so on that have been having services unbroken for 900 years, in certain locations. And this is the first time in history that those things have been broken. It must be something significant in the whole prophecy world. Yeah, and people can fight this thing on so many fronts, but they're not. They're just very two-dimensional protests. And, if you're thick-skinned, seeing 1 million people on the street will mean nothing to you. I understand there were over 1 million for the protests against going into the Middle East war, which didn't even do that much damage to the actual countries of the Western Europe. But there was still over 1 million people in London, and Tony Blair still went ahead. So these people are not deterred by massive numbers, so we know that. We need some actual strategies, which have not been implemented at all. And obviously going to the roots of the causes, as I said, where you locate where these people live. Even an area where they've frequented more and they meet at more. The real policymakers, the Chatham House, for example, where Malema has been seen meeting, and all sorts of, around the world, all sorts of people have been seen to be meeting there. But, we're not flexible enough, and we're not moving in trying different things, which I would like to see happen. These protests are also, what would be better than the protests is all of those people in groups of 20 in the areas where they come from, work the streets and the high streets and the public transport and hand out flyers and basically give people the information that they seem to be missing. I myself, just go like a honey badger, fall into somebody's face and say, you're killing people, you're wearing a mask. And they're like indignant, like, I'm protecting you from COVID. I'm like, no, you're not a good person if you're wearing a mask. And they just walk away. They're like, I've tried various things, nice ways, horrible ways, but at least you actually interacting, because I see in the real actual sphere more people submitting, not less, in spite of the fact that the protests are growing. The number of actual compliance is growing. And it's so easy for them to get a head count of what's going on with this mask wearing, where everybody's basically showing their complete submission in very visible terms. So that's all for now. And hopefully I'll be able to be back on again. My laptop's been down for a long time. There's many things that I always miss, and I wish I had said this and wish I'd said that, even when I do write things down. But I suppose you don't perfect everything. We have interesting couple of months ahead of us. But people are also setting these deadlines, like, when Trump's elected, when this happens, when that happens. But it was the same as previously when these things happened. Brexit, Trump, and still it got worse. You have to keep that in mind. So whether he's elected or not, or whatever happens there, we are going to have to do this thing ourselves. If there's going to be an actual physical fight back, and it's not the return of Christ right now or in the next 3 to 7 years, then it means that this is just another one of these blips in history. And time will tell. But we have to start making strategic gains very quickly. I'm sure you'll all agree. And I think the simplest one is going more to things that count. Major news stations, BBC, SABC, if you're in South Africa, Sky News, non-stop blockading, and continual picketing. And we still haven't seen, as far as I'm concerned, Ghislaine Maxwell could be in a Rothschild residence somewhere, one of their many chateaus that they own around the world. Because who's seen her do an actual perp walk? Who's seen her actually in person? The way they're doing that whole process is just phenomenal. Where you go to the actual courthouse, but inside the courtroom, there's just a screen. And no judges, nobody's actually there. They're all in various locations around the world. And then on that screen is supposed to be these people having a court case. People need to stop seeing internet and television as reality. You need to see actual stuff, like in the old days when they have a public execution. I'm not saying that that's where we need to go, but in certain instances, a lot of these people, that if any of these things are true, they do deserve the death penalty, 100%. Darker and darker things are being revealed. And this worrying thing with that is that you think it's the first time you hear it, you just dismiss it, and then next thing you know, it's actual news. We would have thought Prince Andrew, a royal who had access to fawning, gorgeous, high-heeled, well-bred English girls, was involved with the youngest, most vulnerable, or sort of, maybe they had bad parents as well, many of them, because I believe they did. What on earth were they thinking, just allowing their kids to do that? I bet you most of those girls did not have a father. And there were thousands, by the way. The 2 or 3 that are actually laying charges is just the tip of the iceberg. The rest of them probably took their paychecks and they're very happy with what they got in life. But that's just a little tip of the iceberg. It's not even the most evil of all the things that these people have been involved in. We know about Pizzagate. There's very strange artworks that are going on there that in no possible way is ever going to be considered art. Art is also a topic which is just, to me, has been dragged through the mud. I did study art in high school at a very, very good art school. But what we have and what these artists who are making the millions, is not what they're producing is not art. These people will talk bullshit, baffles brains about this whole thing. But what Marina Abramovich is doing and these people, it's definitely not art. It might take a lot of effort, some of it, but it's nowhere near as much effort as to create real art, you know. So yeah, we know about the strange sculptures and paintings and that they have at Pizzagate. And as with regards to QAnon, I mean, really, housewives and soccer moms can figure it out, but it's got to be kept secret. And the people with access to CIA intel, oh no, they could never figure out these codes, of QAnon, because that's just for the in the know. That's just for us. And Trump has not done anything significant. It's like hinted at it's played to a masterclass as far as I'm concerned, with the way Trump has been a teaser, especially his thing about getting COVID-19 and then saying we must not let this disease rule us. An interesting choice of words. We must not let fear dominate us, in a sense. I'm paraphrasing. I don't know exactly how he said it, but he did intimate that we mustn't be afraid of this illness. No, the government's locked us down. That is essentially was forced upon us. There was no, we all panicked about this illness. The mainstream media hyped it up to the absolute limits, almost crying fire in a crowded theater, where that's actually illegal to do that. We didn't fear this thing, like it was imposed upon us. So why isn't Trump saying the lockdown restrictions must stop now? Look at him. He got over the most deadly disease in the world. I saw a guy riding in the top level of sport, cycling the highest mountains on earth, up there with the best cyclists in the world. And he's been pulled out because he's tested positive. He's at the peak of what this test does. It means nothing. Some people are sick and then they get tested, okay, but then they recover. So it's just essentially the same thing as getting, as we know, a cold or a flu. Boris Johnson didn't die. Trump is now pulled through very quickly. It's total bullshit. We don't need to be locked down. We never did. And if they were really true to their word, this would be the prime objective. Never mind, this is way, way more important than the elections, because this is calling out the entire cabal. And the longer they let this thing fester, it's, if you aid a lie in any way, even if it's just for a moment because you're supposedly playing 4D chess, it's not the right thing to do. We're all relying on, or a lot of people, not we all, but a lot of people are relying on this secret undercurrent, underground movement, which I would say has got about 10% chance of being true. And if it is, I'll be jumping for joy. Believe me, I'll be the first to jump for joy. So, we'll have to change our tactics now, not when Trump's elected or not elected. And then it's holidays, and then he goes on a fucking Camp David, I don't know what, and things just roll on and drone on with this lockdown, which is killing people literally, as well as destroying businesses, killing people because they in the hospitals actually missed treatments. Funerals have been totally devastating because people couldn't even attend. I mean, we know all the ins and outs. We know this is not about a virus. We have the answers. We're just not actually, too few of us believe those are the answers. I don't think and it's not rocket science. I don't believe that they are I think they're quite stupid, to be honest. But they have a massive amount of power. It's like the mafia coming in with a protection racket. Not extremely complex. They say, oh, your restaurant, it needs protection. You're like, no, I'm fine. At night, some masked thugs come in and bash your place up and beat up the staff. And next day, the guy comes, oh, you sure you don't need that protection? See, it's not very high tech, not very intelligent. Yes, some of the things are intelligent, not beyond fathoming, where you've got the entirety of the mainstream media singing from the same hymn sheet. These are not extremely high level tactics. There's a limit to what they can do. It's human intelligence. I don't see anything supernatural except for the fact that the levels that they're prepared to go to is just so black, so dark, that it's quite phenomenal. We haven't seen anything that's not something people who have an IQ above 100 can work it out. They have fancy terms for a lot of these things, like cognitive dissonance. That to me could just be summed up as bullshit baffles brains. But at the end of the day, we go back to the whole thing. We can run around and think it's so clever or so stupid or whatever it is, but they have not found Dracula's lair. The old Mary Shelley, not Mary Shelley, the older Bram Stoker stories, and then the villagers come with the, stakes and torches and look through the cemeteries and look wherever he may be, and eventually they find his castle or old chateau, and they get rid of him. And then his spell is broken over that entire town as well, because all the people that were under his spell no longer have their leader, so they actually just die. And just like Dracula, he's terrified of the truth. So are the cabal. That's why they shut down everything you say on YouTube, comment sections. Facebook have this fact checker thing, which is quite pathetic, honestly, because people are not buying it. Nobody's buying it. It's really just so childish. It's unbelievable. But then, so are so many of these people out there, which I've seen of the younger generation. It's quite scary. But they're so childish, it's beyond belief. Like I say, I've been suspended from a club for saying anti-COVID-19 lockdown stuff. I had a very lawyer-like letter from a young lady who I know is on the committee, and they may have intelligence, but they're using their intelligence and their training for the most idiotic purposes and childish purposes, because now they can't shut you up, so they just eradicate you from life. They unperson you, essentially. And that is the system even pre-COVID. These kind of silent assassins that you can have if you disobeyed certain made-up political correctness rules, and now the new one is COVID-19 denier. And then they just shut you down and unperson you, and eventually you go down the memory hole. But we urgently need to go to the source of these problems in massive numbers, not so that one guy can go and take a risk and get arrested. You know, even those groups in South Africa, I know they've got a hell of a battle on their hands because they have to deal with actual murders as well. But I'm telling you, the smartest thing would actually be for them to go to these places where they know it's coming from. I mean, the guy, EFF is being funded, knowingly funded by, at Chatham House, there's somebody, Lord Renwick, who was meeting with there in London. Also, another guy in Lesotho or Swaziland, I'm not sure exactly where he lives. And again, it's pathetic if people can say, oh, because it's too difficult to find them. Honestly, that's really, you know, of thousands of people can find out names and addresses. I mean, already we know Ramaphosa's got some properties at the top of Fresno, right high up on the mountain slopes there. And next door he's got some other friends, and next door, and so on and so on. Other cabal, African cabal members. When they know their properties are being picketed, even if they're not there at the time, it's different to when it's like just out and it's just politics. Because politics is not a game we win. Politics is a game that the billionaires and the trillionaires win. We know this now. And the cabal. Even when we've got more numbers than them, even when the actual democracy, which they jump up and down about all the time, even when democratically we win, they still win. You know, there's no criteria, there's no way that we win that game. Take it out of the realm of politics. It needs to be anywhere else but there. And of course, you know, we also have to look at our own involvement, but also not get too deeply put off. But we all contribute in some way or another. Watching things you shouldn't watch on the internet, or supporting strip clubs, that some men have done. We're all guilty to an extent, but there's just that's not good enough. There's no ways we can let these people get away with what they've done. You know, as the Bible says, those to whom much is given, much is expected. These billionaires and trillionaires have taken the fat of the land. And we need to get them now. It's time for them to pay up. And they need to locate Dracula's lair. Anyway, that's all for now.